Rite of Passage, the podcast with Giabra Martin.
Cool. All right. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the show. We are here with author Jessie Bradford. How are you today?
Oh, I'm great.
Very good. Excellent. I appreciate it. I like everything behind you. So you're a veteran, correct?
Yes, sir.
Army, Marines, which branch?
I was Army. I had too many tattoos for Marines, so Army was the only one that would take me.
Very cool. Did you go anywhere interesting?
No, I stayed stateside.
Okay.
Lovely Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Very cool. All right.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your service. How long are you still in, or how long were you in for?
Nope, I did my four, and then I got out for a medical. I got hurt,
Mm.
so it was just easier to transfer out.
No, for sure, for sure. Well, yeah, appreciate that. So I got your Amazon profile pulled up here. You are a very prolific writer.
Yeah, I read a lot of different things and a lot of different genres, and I tend to try to do something for everybody.
Just kind of like whatever's inspiring you at that moment, kind of thing.
Yeah, usually seasons. Like I try to put more horror out during, Halloween time and
Right.
um, just kind of go with that.
Well, that's interesting. So it looks like, so I see like in the house of the Lord. That's not a horror story. That's like a religious story.
So that one is based on true events.
Okay.
So actually, I worked as a correctional officer in Texas.
Whoa.
So I had one-on-ones with a lot of inmates who actually dealt with the human trafficking in Houston.
Wow.
So I just got the idea one day to use some of their story because that's that it was crazy just to hear some of the things that they did. And
Right.
then I reached out to some victims who I changed names and some dates and everything like that. And I just used some of their stories to what happened to them as far as being trafficked. So,
Whoa.
yeah.
That's pretty profound. So was it like a maximum security, or what kind of prison was it?
So it was a gang reannouncement unit. So we had everyone from, um, they have like six or seven really high profile gangs and that come over from Mexico and all this other stuff,
Yeah.
being so close to the border.
Right.
Uh, but we also had people that had drug offenses. So we had a little bit of everything there.
Wow. Yeah, I'm looking at that. I'm like that. I have so many questions about that. So you reached out to some of the victims, obviously for their privacy and everything, but like, so the offenders and then some of the people that were victims of these specific offenders.
Yeah, so they had a lot of programs down there to help actual victims that had been trafficked through all different levels. Ones
Right.
that, you know, so I just took a little bit of everybody's. It wasn't just necessarily one or two people. I just kind of combined everyone's story and kind of made it my own a little bit. But I did reference a lot of things that these people have went through, and
Right.
yeah, it's graphic, but it's real. So I mean, I like
Yeah.
that. But
And we do have to like look at the ugly stuff, right? Like a lot of times it's easier to just avoid that and read the entertaining stuff, but some of these stories like Sound of Freedom, and it's like we need to talk about these things for sure. Um,
right,
and this is one. So like sometimes at the airport you'll see a thing that's like, oh, keep an eye out for human trafficking, and like you're like, what does that look like? Like what
right.
does human trafficking look like? And I don't think it looks the way most of us expect by any means.
Especially these days because it's a lot of now. It's more internet profiles. It's
Hmm.
Craigslist. It's that kind of. It's not necessarily just someone gets kidnapped and taken and thrown into this world. A
Right.
lot of it is somebody knows somebody, and it could be a boyfriend, a friend, a girlfriend, and they're just it's a whole slew of things
It's
nowadays.
horrifying, right? I've also heard, with like the way that immigration's been the last, however many years, and all these, kind of people coming in, and we're not really sure who all is coming in. There's I've heard there's a lot of kids that have gone missing. And it might not look the way people expect. I mean, they might get, they might just go on a bus or get in a van with a bunch of other kids and then just they'd kind of disappear from the system, right? And no one, there's no screaming, there's no yelling, there's no people in ski masks. I mean, there might be people holding clipboards who are saying they're from some organization and they just say, oh, you come this way, you go in here, and then that's it. And they disappear into whatever.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. So, did you write the book while you were a corrections officer? Like, I can imagine that'd probably piss off some bosses.
Um, I think a lot of it was while I was there.
Yeah.
I worked 12-hour shifts, 4 days in a row, and then we had 4 days off. So there was a lot of downtime. I always carried a notebook with me, and I would just jot some things down. Obviously, I didn't put in the real names of people.
Right.
So it's not like you can go to the website and pull up a specific inmate because it's not just one inmate.
Right.
Left a lot of the prison side is not in it. It's more of what happened before
Before.
and so there's no news story that you can look up. I kept everything as confidential as I could, uh,
Right. And
just
if
for
they're
everybody.
yeah, and if they're crimes that people have already convicted of, it's all public records anyway, right? It's like,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh, did that take a toll on you to write that? Because I mean, obviously, like looking at such heavy things.
Honestly, it probably should have, but
Yeah.
I have just always been the type of person, I can leave it so
Yeah.
I can disconnect. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but when we first started working in the prisons, one of the trainee training officers was like, "Look, do your 8, leave it at the gate," and that just stuck with me. So
Yeah. Don't take it home, right?
exactly,
Oof. Yeah, it's definitely not a job that's for everyone. I mean, it has to be done. But I think a lot of people like probably don't have the right stuff to compartmentalize it or,
yeah,
just be facing with that and draw a clear line like, okay, I go home and I'm back to the real world, quote unquote, right?
yeah,
Oh, yeah, the prison. Sometimes I think about it. I think about all the people in prison. It's like it's just kind of baffling to think like, I mean, millions of people that are just like in a box and for all different reasons, right? Like some very good reasons, some ridiculous reasons. And you're like,
right.
I mean, and it's like a quiet world that we kind of hide away. Like our society, just like death, we kind of like hide it away and pretend like it's not happening. We all go about our business. But I mean, it is like, it's one of these things it trips me up when I really think about it. I'm like, God, like, what a crazy thing.
It's a whole world inside there. It's completely different, but
Right.
they're all kind of the same. I mean, they're all their own worlds because they live there. So we just
Right.
are guests, and they have their own set of rules and everything else.
They've got an economy, they've got a whole set of rules,
Yeah.
there's a whole hierarchy. Um, yeah, it's a totally different world. And it is, I mean, when you say like they live there, so one of these things I think about, like one time I did a tour of an aircraft carrier, and I like
Yeah.
when I saw that there was a mail room and there's like a barber shop, I was like, oh wait, like you'd have to, right? I mean, like people are living on this boat. Like the boat has to behave like a town. It needs to have
Yeah.
all the things. And like a prison is probably no different, right? Like it has to behave like a town.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
has everything medical, it has mail, they have a little store that they can buy stuff from. They work, it has a school. So it is.
Yeah. We could probably, God, we could get into so much about that. I could pick your brain all day on this. I do want to stay focused on your books though. So you've got a whole lot of books, and I'm not even sure totally where to start. Do you have a personal favorite?
I have two personal favorites.
Okay.
So one I wrote called Burnt.
Okay, let me look at that one here.
Yep.
Um, okay, yeah, I see that one.
So that one I actually wrote while I was in high school.
No kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
I started it. I wrote everything for it basically in high school. I just revamped it a little bit as I got
Mhm.
older and
Yeah.
made the words sound a little bit better. uh, that one's probably my favorite just because I like the story of it. It does have graphic details. There is a couple adult scenes, but it's not my most graphic.
What is it about?
So it's about a kid named Chase and a group of his friends. They're 17 years old. They are walking around the streets. I live in, I'm from an area near Flint, Michigan. So
Okay.
that's where it takes place. There's a place in Flint. It's an abandoned house. They want to go into it. And basically, there's an old legend of a killer or something that lived there beforehand.
Mm.
So they're checking it out, and some some things happen, and an accident where a fire takes over the house. Um, Chase wakes up in the hospital. Chase is my main character,
Mhm.
and he is covered in burns. His girlfriend left him, and he has his two best friends. Well, as it then it switches to him just being older. He now works kind of behind the scenes with his best friends as an architect for trying to build up Flint, making it a better place.
Mm.
Um, and one of his new clients turns out to be the love of his life.
Mm.
So it has that little bit of drama in it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's super. So you wrote that in high school.
yeah,
That kind of baffles me because, like, I think about this sometimes. It was like in high school, I had so much time, but I didn't know anything. Like, I had no experience to draw on to write something. Like, my sense of imagination was definitely, I mean, I was just like focused on my friends and just being dumb and, all this kind of stuff. But so you had good ideas even in high school. And you're like, oh, that'd be a cool book. And you like knew enough to actually actualize this. You're like, you know what? I am going to write a book.
yeah. The cabin I also wrote in high school. I had a notebook that I would pass around to my friends, and they would read it as I was writing it. So it was motivation.
Nice.
Yeah,
That takes a lot of confidence. So a lot of the authors I interview, the one thing that holds them up is like this confidence piece that's like I'd love for people to read the story, but I'm also horrified people are like reading my stories. You know what I mean? It's like
yeah.
this mixed bag. So to have people reading it as you're writing it, like showing them the first draft,
Oh, it was
that's
very first draft.
that's a bit bold. It's a bit bold. Most people are not. And maybe that's the beauty of being in high school. It's like
Right.
you like don't know what you don't know. So like we have all the confidence in the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so what is the cabin about?
Cabin is about a group of friends that are graduating high school and getting ready to go off to college. Well, they do one little getaway to their friend's uncle's cabin in the woods, and there is one incident that happens that changes the whole book. I like to say real life horror just because it's something that is horrible that happens in real life.
Yeah,
Uh,
okay.
and then it is one of my favorite endings because I am not a big believer of happy endings.
Okay.
So if you read my stories, most of them do not have the guy gets the girl, happy ending,
Right.
life forever goes on.
Ugh.
But if you want that, then I warn you, don't turn the page. If you turn the page, you get my actual ending.
Right. Like more like real life. Like, look, here's how it's gonna go.
Yeah.
Oh, that's how I always feel about whenever I read Hemingway. It's like they just sort of end, and I'm like, oh, and like they just sort of end with like life is hard and things
Yeah.
don't work out, but we're still trying. But like, no, it's not gonna. Yeah, it's not. We're not gonna put a bow on it at the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so do you primarily write like horror, or I mean, it looks like because I see it looks like you've got like romance novels, you've got horror novels, you've got a couple true stories.
Yep.
Yeah. So you just whatever you feel like writing.
Yeah. I mean, most of the time it'll just come to me um, if I'm on my way to work because I
Yeah.
used to have a 2 hour drive basically. So it would just come to me in that or a dream or just something that sparks an interest. And I'm just like, you know what? Let me run with it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
definitely. A lot of my best ideas are in the car, right? Just something about that, like some part of you is distracted, and then like just ideas flowing, like you're a radio or something, and you're just like, oh, they just pop into your head, and you just kind of roll with them, and you're like, you know what? I am gonna write a book on that. So
Yep.
you must be a very fast writer, I would imagine, because um, I'm not gonna like guess your age, but you can't be like much older than I am. But like, damn, like you've written a lot of things here.
So some of them are shorter stories, like Skinned is, I think, only 50, 60 pages.
Okay.
um, it was a quick little Halloween. Um, I have Burnt is a little bigger, The Cabin's a little bigger.
Yeah.
In the House of the Lord, that is my actual, like, probably biggest novel I have.
Mm.
Uh, so a lot of them are more shorter stories,
Hmm.
but
I will say the cover for Skinned is probably it's up there with my favorite. Like the House of the Lord, that one, and in art they call it chiaroscuro, which is like this light and dark thing, and it's almost like a master painter will use like the light colors to like guide your eye around it. So like that one with just this contrast, um, and like the wooden cross being in color, that one definitely I'm like I don't know like absolutely pops and keeps like drawing my attention. But the one for Skinned is very very cool. Who designs your covers? You use like a consistent person or
I do them. I pretty much do everything myself.
no kidding.
Yeah, I use obviously an app, and it'll give some references most of the time.
Hmm.
But I pretty much have switched things around, move things, do the
Yeah.
color, all that stuff, the lettering, and then yeah, well, that's just always done it myself. I don't have the trust in other people, I guess, or I like the control of it.
You know, it's a thing. My when I have worked with other people, my biggest, most frustrating thing is like as an artist, you're like all hyped up and you're like urgent, right? Like I took the time to write and I'm so excited to put it out there. And then you're like waiting on other people, the edits to come. I'm like, oh, 6 weeks. And like, okay, no, another 6 weeks. And like always drove me crazy. I'm like, I want this book right now, you know?
That and I see it in my head. So everybody can be like, okay, skin. They're gonna
Mhm.
see 30 different things, 30 different you ask 30 different people what they see in their head for a cover that's called skinned, you're
Right.
gonna get 30 different ideas. And it
Right.
may not match what I want. So I just like I do it myself.
If you've got like a certain vision for like, hey, this is what I'm picturing and this is the vibe
Right.
I'm trying to present, it is very, very compelling. Like I want to zoom in on it and take a closer look at it. One thing I do think of sometimes, and I'm not sure like, readers totally, but I think about like totally understand this, but I think about this as an indie author, there's so many different skills you learn. And it's like, damn, like what can we do with all these skills? Because there's like obviously the writing, there's also the editing, there's the graphic design, the marketing, the publishing. Like there are so many individual skills that go into this. And you're like, damn, like it's like enough to start a business, like doing
Right.
anything right.
Yeah.
What do you write full time or what do you do outside of writing?
No, I actually work for the state of Michigan.
Hmm.
I work for CPS, so Child Protective
Okay.
Services.
Wow.
Uh, that is Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Um, some weekends, depending on if you're on call or not. So yeah,
Yeah. So you just involve yourself in things that'll just give you story ideas, whether it's like corrections, it's, child
yeah,
protective services. You're like, I am surrounded by wild stories.
yeah, hundred
Oh,
percent. I mean, my life is it's. I've always picked jobs that just kind of add to it, I guess.
right. For there was a time I toyed with being like a EMS or paramedic, and I was like, God, like the things you'd see, and apparently they only last 5 years or less on average because it's just, and I don't know if it's just like I'm not paid enough for this or like the mental strain or you know, like I imagine you have some weird dreams after a while and you're like, God, I've seen too many like torn up people.
Right.
Uh, yeah, that's got to be, and I got to imagine that's got to be a bit of a tough job for sure. The child protective services.
It can be it case by case basis. I mean,
Right.
sometimes you see some stuff. Sometimes it's mommies and daddies fighting.
Yeah, just average kind of things. And maybe they get
Yeah.
out of control or they're misperceived by the neighbors or whatever, whoever calls. Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but ultimately, I mean, it's valuable work that like needs to happen. So like, I'm glad you're doing that job. I'm glad there's people doing that job for sure. Hey, so you told me, okay, your favorite one is Burnt. What is your second favorite?
It would be skinned.
Skinned?
Yep.
Tell
It
me,
was just fun to write.
I love Skin to Wife's Revenge. I'm like,
Yes.
okay, my wife might want to read that one.
Yeah,
Tell me
that
more
one.
about it. Yeah.
Um, so it's told in a female's point of view. She is actually in the army. She comes back from a deployment to find her husband has been cheating on her.
Mm.
And she has basically a moment that is like, you know what? I'm going to use my skills and we're going to make him and the mistress pay.
Oh,
And
it's like
she does.
the opposite of taken. It's like found. Like, I have a very
Right.
particular skin.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And then I imagine she probably tries to get away with it, or maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
She
because it
is.
can't just be the violence. It's got to be like, okay, now afterward, and you're like, okay, like, where do we go from
Yeah.
here?
It's the whole planning and it's the what happens next is she has to get ready to go back on deployment and try not to get caught.
Wow. Well, I'm
I
super.
mean,
Yeah, that sounds probably hits a little bit too close to home. You hear these stories every once in a while, and you're like, yeah, I don't know, it definitely happens. And I'm pretty sure in the military they have a term for that, where it's like it used to be like a man was out on deployment, and then the wife has like a side boyfriend or something. And in Spanish, I think they call it a Sancho.
yeah,
I'm not sure what they call it in the. There was a term, and I'm not.
Jody.
Yes, that's what it was. That's what it was.
Yep.
But yeah, sort of the opposite. So like she's like, the badass, and the wife's, or the husband's at home kind of being a piece of garbage. Yeah.
Yep.
Tell me about Bottoms Up, because that cover too, that cover is very compelling with like kind of the eyes lurking in the shadow.
The Bottom Up is the second book in my House of the Lord series.
Okay.
So it follows the same characters getting revenge of what takes place in the first book.
Mm.
Um, I don't want to give too much away.
Right. But still mostly a true story. I mean, based on real events.
So that one still has the same true story to it as far as what led up to everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then that one's more of fiction based on. So basically, a child gets taken,
Mm-hmm.
and from the main character's child being taken, it gets taken to basically the better word would be baby factory, and the
Mm-hmm.
baby factory part is actually the truest part.
Whoa.
And yeah,
Like human cattle type stuff. Like, okay, so
so
yeah,
yeah,
tell me about that in real life. Like, just yeah.
so I did a lot of research
Right.
with my human trafficking, and basically there was a story about a news article about I forget the actual term they used, but it was basically a baby farm.
Mm.
People would illegally adopt these children, make women have baby after baby, keep them in cages, and basically just use them as human baby makers. And then once they couldn't have kids or were done with them, they killed them off or send them to working farms, kind of thing, as far as the human trafficking side of it. So, and
Okay, I got a lot of questions on that. We might spend some time on this here. So, okay, is most of this in real life taking place like in the US?
mhm. Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So basically, okay, these women, they're being impregnated, they're having children. These children never make it to a hospital. They don't have a birth certificate. They're nowhere in the system, no social security number. No one knows they're missing or anything. No one knows they exist. So then they can be sent anywhere.
They can be sold to anyone, and it's
Oh.
mainly. So the article I actually read was an adoption agency, and they were illegal, filtering out these kids to, let's face it, white, rich, privileged people that couldn't have babies of their own. So they reached out. Not a, I'm. I don't know if they knew how illegal it was actually being, but I mean, you're buying a
Right.
child, so
Right. Not exactly adopting a child.
Right. It
Uh,
was money, and that's what it was.
so in terms of the people running these operations, I mean, are they like cartel, or are they like people in suits who are like business people who are just evil as hell?
And it's everyday people. You have the ones working in the actual adoption things that you would have never guessed. You
Right.
have a sweet old lady who's saying, "Oh, we have this baby that just came to us," not knowing, or maybe knowing, that they got where this kid came from. Oh, mommy was a drug addict, left her somewhere.
Just some
You
easy
know what I mean?
story, like
Yeah,
left with the fire department.
100%.
Um,
And so the gory details might not be known to those people, but
yeah. There's
blind
there's,
eye, you know?
there's got to be, yeah, a lot of people who turn a blind eye throughout the process, right? And like
Right.
we don't ask questions, we just collect a paycheck.
Exactly. Above my pay grade kind of thing.
See, we need to talk about those stories a lot. Like I know in the last 4 years, like human trafficking as an industry has exploded, and it's like we'll never know the real numbers, but it's estimated right now as it stands as like $236 billion a year. And there's people who are legitimately like evil, the creeps, the pedophiles, but then there's also the people who are just looking at the dollar signs.
Right.
And then there's a bunch of people who are turning a blind eye and don't want to talk about it, don't want to look at it. Um, and I think about this a lot. Like, and I know you read my one story, Truth and Evil, but the thing that I always think about is like, you look at like, okay, Nazi Germany, and you're like, all right, how does an entire country of like hardworking, educated people go to commit such unspeakable evil? Um, and I worked in sales a lot before I was writing, and I've always been baffled by how many adults are willing to say or do anything to achieve their goals. Like integrity is a rare quality.
Yeah.
Right. So like all these people involved in this human trafficking, and they might not feel like evil. They might think like, well, I didn't get my hands dirty. I didn't do this. I just signed the paperwork. But like so many people have to be complicit in a web like that, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, look at it. And it's not just women or children being trafficked. You have grown men that are work trafficked. So
Right.
they're doing all this labor, and you're not thinking anything of it, being the one that's hired them or bought them to do this work.
Right.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
words,
It's unbelievable. Like we need to tell as many stories about this as possible, make as many movies, especially movies, just because like it can reach so many people.
right.
Um, but actually, I learned yesterday books is still a bigger industry than movies and music combined. So it's like books definitely matter. Um, but I have heard like a very astonishing, scary thing. There's actually more slaves on Earth today than there were in like the 1850s or 1840s. Yeah. And partly it's because we have just more people. So there's just going to be, like even if slavery is a much smaller percentage, there's just so many more people. But um, this issue isn't behind us, and it's not even a racial thing. I mean, it's like an economic thing.
Yeah.
I don't even know. I always wonder. So, like, when it comes to human trafficking, there's two pieces, right? There's like obviously the sex labor thing, but then there's also just like labor.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering, like, where is this labor? And like, what are they building? And like, how do they just vanish into and like no one is aware of it? No neighbors see it. Like,
Right.
I can't wrap my head around it exactly. You know what I mean?
I think, and I don't want to make it sound any worse than it actually might be, but look
Yeah.
at all the immigrants that come over,
Mm-hmm.
and they are cheaper workers. They basically make these people work sun up to sundown and give them pennies to the dollar. In
Right.
my opinion, that's a form of it. If you're not going to
Right.
pay them a living wage and you're just working them until they fall over, I mean, that in my eyes is no different than, I mean, you're basically buying this person to do a whole bunch of stuff for nothing.
Right. You hold all the cards, right? Like
Right.
if they complain, you're like, well, you're out of here. And then what the hell are they going to do? They're in some foreign place with no options where they're kind of trying to fly under the radar or something. Yeah, we're perpetuating this problem by not confronting it, not talking about it. But it really is astonishing. I mean, it's horrible stuff. And I do wonder how many people are involved in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, I think it would scare the hell out of us to really know and look at it. But it seems like these stories are more and more coming to the surface. So that's a blessing at least, right? Like none of this is new. That's the thing. Like it may be an expanding, growing industry, but like people have basically been doing this forever. So I'm like, okay, the fact that it's coming to light, we're talking about it, and I'm like, that is progress.
Oh yeah.
Society's willing to look at it.
And that's the hardest part is getting people to actually acknowledge it because you don't see it. You can go to a million stores and all this other stuff and know that okay, sweatshops were a thing.
Right? They still are, right? These shoes I'm
Yeah,
wearing, this phone I'm
right.
using.
And we don't think about it as okay, well, a little child might have made my shoes and all this other stuff. We don't think that. We just buy it because we like it. And
Right.
it's kind of the same thing. Like, not to put it in a negative way, but you have workers on the street who are selling their bodies, and these people are just doing what they want, and it's they get what they need and they go. And
Yeah,
it's kind of like this, yeah,
all the Johns and stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
yeah,
it's an issue.
no, it's ugly for sure. And we do need to be more conscious. Like I would love if there was a database of like, let's say just American companies that are American manufacturers. And it was almost like an Amazon alternative that was all just reputable American labor. And I'm willing to pay a little bit more, you know what I mean, for obviously higher quality, but then also to know like, okay, I don't have to feel like it's
Right.
not something I need to just avoid because like it would be too hard to look at kind of thing,
Yeah.
Uh yeah, that's it does well, just really quick. It makes me laugh when these companies lecture us on like moral virtues and things, right? Like,
Right.
we use slave labor, but listen, you need to be more accepting, better person. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. Thanks, Dad. Oh,
Right.
oh, no, I appreciate it. And I don't mean to go off on too much of a tangent. I knew we'd get into some deep things here. I was very excited about this talk because I knew you'd have some things. So you looks like you've got a fair bit of romance novels.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Um,
So you're like, are you like kind of a hopeless romantic at heart? I mean, you're like, oh, we're going between romance and horror, and I'm like, it's so interesting.
so uh see again, it's not necessarily romance because I don't do happy endings.
Mm.
My more romancy stuff, The Boss's Girl. So
Okay.
it's a very short story. It is literally as it says. A guy starts working at a office. He meets the a girl who works there. She is HR and finds out that she's having an inappropriate relationship with her boss.
Mm.
And that doesn't stop him from that one is more my erotic. So
Okay.
there it is full of that's what it's smut, so to speak. Um, and it is based kind of on a true situation of a place I did work.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, the ending is my own. It's definitely made up ending. It's not happy by any means,
Right.
um, but
I see on the cover she's wearing a wedding ring, so there's
yeah,
there's got to be these forbidden elements, right?
100%.
Yeah, and the names have been changed to protect the innocent, right?
Oh yes, but I let the person read the story, so and they liked it. So
They're like, yeah, no, that was about how it went down. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
I
accurate.
mean, she read it and was like, "Oh, how did you know?" And I'm like, I have eyes. Like you
We
guys
all
were not
do.
hiding things. Like
Oh,
everybody knows.
God, I had my first epiphany with that at like a Domino's pizza back in the day when I was like 17. And it was like the girl who was like cooking and then the manager and he asked her to do something and she like just told him to like F off or something. And it was very dramatic and like everyone went about their business. And I was like, oh wait, like you two are getting it on and everyone here knows it. And I'm like, oh, I'm the only one who didn't know that. I was like, God, who talks to their boss like that? I was like, oh, they're a lot more than boss and employee, huh? Yeah. I mean, it does happen though, because like you think of your job, and I mean, these are the people you spend the most time with, like even more than your spouse, right? I mean, if you're doing
Right.
9 to 5, I mean, 8 hours a day, I mean, you get to know these people, they become friends, and the lines get blurry, and it does happen for sure. That's real life.
Yep.
Yeah. What is About Last Night? Because I like the
So
like light graphic.
that one came out right when Skin did, because I wanted to give an option. That has, and it's a big trigger warning right
Mm.
when you open the first page. It is the first half of it is full of smut. There is every chapter, and then it goes to, if you make it to the second part, there's more of a storyline. And that one I will say is probably the only one that has a happy ending.
Okay.
You just have to get to it.
I kind of thinking about this with like like men writing smut, right? Because obviously like it is a huge market.
Yeah.
And like women kind of joke about like men, like our perspective writing smut, like it's like what women want versus like the way men think. Sometimes there can be like a huge disconnect,
Right.
like the way a man would describe the same event versus a lady. But yeah, I mean, like how's the response been with these?
They love the boss's girl.
Okay.
Um, the About Last Night is still pretty new.
Okay.
So I don't have much on that. Like I just did a book signing on Saturday, and I didn't even have copies of that one just because there was a mix up with Amazon.
Oh, no
So I
kidding.
wasn't even able to get that one out yet. So
Yeah.
that's still my newer one. It's not. I haven't put it out as much yet, but I like to
Right.
have copies in my hand before I do that. Um,
Very cool. When you do your like book signings, that like at a Barnes and Noble or local bookstores or
Usually it's bookstores just around. There's three that actually work with a lot of indie authors. They
nice.
do big events. They have one coming up for Mother's Day,
Mm,
and then it's R&B bookstore in Grand Blanc, Michigan, and
nice.
then Frankenmuth is Charlin's Book Nook, and they both put on really big author events. Like they just started up the novel event,
Mm,
and it's a bunch of genres of indie authors here in Michigan.
okay.
And they blasted it, and it was such a great turnout. They're gonna do it every year now.
Damn.
So
So they're like really rallying around and the
yeah,
readers are supporting it too. They're like, hey,
oh
there's a
yeah,
whole world of indie books that we'd like to explore.
the turnout was amazing. They did just like I think they had over 700 people that day,
No
and that's not
kidding.
including like the authors or the people there
Just
helping out.
customers, fans,
Yeah,
readers. God.
yeah,
Oh, I love to see it. I want to see more and more of that. I know
right.
Zoom is about to kick us out here. This always happens. Jesse, I'm going to make sure all of your links are in the description. I'll put the Amazon for the books. Anyone listening to this, check out these books.